Welcome back to the Behind Their Business podcast, or if this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. Today, our guest is going to share about the importance of celebrating your wins to continue making progress in your life and business, because how many of us do not take the time to celebrate? I'm raising my hand right now. I do not do it enough, but this is always a really important reminder. So I'm glad that she's going to be here and talking to us about this. But in her business, our guest is a visibility strategist who helps female entrepreneurs become known as the expert in their niche by sharing their voice, story, and value, which I absolutely love. So she's going to share some of her own story in this episode here. So please welcome Avi Anderson. Wait, I said that wrong. Avi Anderson. Oh my gosh, we just talked about that. Avi
So close,
Anderson.
but you know, it's okay.
My eye said
I
one
usually
thing and
give
my
people
brain
a
said
few
another
tries.
thing.
No, you're fine. You're perfectly fine.
So let's just dive right in. Tell us what you were doing before you became a visibility strategist. So, were you working in corporate? What were you doing in the online space? Take us on a journey to where you were before to where you're at now.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And thank you, Steph, for having me here. I am super excited to be having a chat with you. So where I started was not quite corporate. I actually worked in a government agency. So, similarly, when you leave a job that is, quote unquote, secure, right? You get a lot of feedback. And so I actually was in the process of leaving my 9 to 5 job in the government agency in during the 2020, that time. And it's not because of COVID. It was really, gosh, if I can take you kind of further back, um, I I don't typically share this, but this is actually it does come up for some people, that moment that makes you really kind of take a look at your life. And so what happened in 2017 was I lost my sister to cancer, and I really did not grieve for a long, long time until it took me really a couple years. And so when I finally took the time to do that, I think the grieving process took me to a place where I'm now really taking a good look at my life. And I remember sitting on the sofa. I was about to turn the same age as my sister who had passed. So she was actually 37 years old and she passed. And so I was just turning that age. And, it was just that moment, right, that you took inventory of your life and a hard look into kind of what am I doing? And so, because of that moment, I decided that I wanted to not have to choose the work life and the mom life. And seeing my sister really having kind of been caught up in that, societal pressure. And so I didn't want that for myself. And then I also have a daughter, and I didn't want to lead her down that path as well, and feeling like you could only choose your career or motherhood. And so that really was kind of the first and big why for me to start my business. And a lot like the ladies in the community here, I did start as a VA. And so I um I'm laughing because it's just surprised at how quickly you can kind of propel yourself if you have that big goal in mind, right? And so my goal was like I'm going to get out of this 9 to 5 gate, and I'm just gonna go. And so that's exactly what I did. I bought a course to learn how to become a VA, made the investment, paid it in installments, right? Whatever I could to get started. And then got, plugged into the community, and then found my first client. And my first client, I was actually a general VA since I had a lot of experience in managing projects, facilitating, coordinating projects and organizing um, certain projects, things like that. So I kind of brought those skill sets. And so that was kind of what gave me the confidence to start is like, okay, I do have certain experience that are transferable. And so that helped me found my first client. And, I did customer service. It was an e-commerce kind of business. And then I basically managed the social media. And that was the new skill set that I had to learn. And so that was really cool. Just kind of diving in and learning these new skill sets, like as I'm trying to create that runway to exit the 9 to 5. And yeah, so that's the origin of my story. And then so I don't spend 20 minutes all of the podcast time sharing my journey, I'll just go ahead and forward. And so since then, a lot like you, Steph, how you've mentioned about having multiple businesses all in the span of, the few short years, I also gave myself time to try different things. I would try social media. I tried, you know, um, Facebook ads. I tried building business, all of those things in search of finding what it is that lights me up or where I can find it to be my zone of genius or, where I want to really make an impact. And so that's what brought me into podcast managing. And I actually specialize more in pitching versus the management part. And that's because I love connecting people. And so that's where it really lights me up is um, usually when I walk into a room, I see the person who might be hiding in the corner, and then I actually go to them and try to connect them and bring them out and connect with other people. And so I enjoy doing that. And I feel like that's what I get to do as a podcast visibility strategist.
Very cool. Well, first of all, let me say I did not know about your sister, so I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. Also, you're older than 37 years old. You look incredible. I would never, I thought you were like 23
Thank you.
when I looked at you, to be totally honest. So, but in all seriousness, I am sorry that happened to your sister, but it is interesting when we go through really hard life experiences like that. It does have such an incredible impact on our life. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of put a positive spin on that in a way. And also not only for your life, but for your daughter's life too, to show her that there is more out there for her. She can do literally whatever she wants in her own life. So I think that's such a beautiful thing. Now, just to kind of like set like the a timeline. I like to do timelines. It's just how I think. How long have you been in business total, and how long were you in your 9 to 5 while it was a side hustle? I think people enjoy hearing that.
Sure. Yeah. I love timelines as well. Um, and I see that on your website. I'm like, okay, what's Steph's timeline?
Yeah, it's a
So
long one. Yeah.
same here. So while I was at my 9 to 5, I had also tried a couple other things before I even tried VA. So I've tried, the Amazon FBA. So that's like retail arbitrage, right? A lot of people have tried that. Let's just say that
That
was a
too.
big boom, right?
Yep.
And great experience. It taught me how to hustle, taught me how to research and gather information and data, all that good stuff. And so I had started that while I was at my day job. And because it's a product-based business, while I enjoyed that, it was just a lot of like, I guess I couldn't get over the having to do quick turnovers with the retail arbitrage, right? It's like, $2 profit here and dollar profit there. And so I was like, okay, I'm out, not for me. And just, decided to try the VA thing, which was funny because when I started my Amazon FBA, I went towards also the white label where create your own brand and you sell it on the Amazon platform, right? So I actually hired out for social media. And because I hired out, I was also able to learn for that business. And that's what was able to give me the skills for finding my first client. That's what I was able to basically show proof of, like, you know, leading a strategy for an actual product. And so, yeah, that worked out really well. It's funny how, you think this is what you're going to do, but it turns out to be kind of like an opening for the next, you know, the next business or the next step in your life.
Mhm. So how long before you went full time in your business? What was
So
the
I went full time in let's see, mid 2020. So in July, I officially gave my last like 2 weeks notice in July. So I started all this back in like 2019,
Okay. So you're doing it for like about a year.
2018, 2019. Yeah. And
Year,
then
year and a half.
I really started my VA. I started my VA actually in February of 2020. And so it only took, yeah, I have pretty low risk tolerance. So I was like, all right, I was able to have proof of concept. I'm going to give it a go. And so, yeah, so after having my first client, that's when I really felt confident enough to let my full-time job go. And so it was like a span of what, 3 months, 4 months. And then I gave my 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that you had that confidence. It took me 3 years to leave my full-time job. So whenever I
You
talk to
know,
people who were like able to get in and out really quickly, I love that because I was just, I mean, I don't know about you, but I was a completely different person when I was in my 9 to 5 job. And like this idea of building a business, at least for me, it was, I didn't know what I was doing, which is why I started 8 businesses that first year because I was like, I have no freaking clue what I'm doing. And it gets really overwhelming for a lot of people. So I love that you were able to just kind of like zone in on what your goal is. You're like, I'm not going to get distracted. Like, this is my goal. I'm going to do it. And then you did it, which is awesome. And I love hearing that. So,
you know,
congratulations.
it sounds like super quick, but I don't know, in my mind, it just seemed like, okay, it was going to take forever. I think I had set those dates, like oftentimes, right? You're setting that dream exit date. And I think I moved it a couple times. And I think what really helped me was I invested in a business coach, and she coached me through life and business, all of the things. And I think having those foundational steps and someone to kind of guide me and coach me on the way, that really propelled me and gave me that boost of confidence for sure.
I completely agree. And I'm not just saying that because I am a business coach, but I have done some similar things in the past as well. And having somebody who has an outside perspective come in and say, like, this is what actually needs to happen so you don't get caught up in your own head makes such a difference at every
Huge.
level of business. Like, whether you're just starting out, whether you're at the growth phase, whether you're at the scaling phase, I think it's so important to always have a mentor. That's my personal belief, though. Um, Now, let's talk about celebrating wins because I know, like I said, this is something that I personally don't do enough of. I try to, but then I just kind of get distracted by life. So, how do you celebrate your wins? Do you have like a go-to thing that you do, a go-to experience, or do you kind of just like pick and choose what your like not like gift to yourself, like what your celebration is based on what the win is. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I also want to kind of preface this with I am definitely not consistent. And And so I think before jumping on the show, I actually emailed you and your team and basically, kind of had to full disclosure. I'm not an expert at this. It's not something that I can even consistently do, but it is
Wait,
something
you
that I
mean you're
feel
a
that needs
human?
to be.
You're
Yeah,
a human being and
exactly.
you're not consistent? Wow.
Right,
Shocking.
right, exactly. And I just, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I think we need to talk more about it because for the times that even just thinking back when I am in a coaching session or listening to strategies and everything, the part about celebrating, I feel like it gets like 1% talked about, and then everything else is like about goals and productivity and everything. So I love that we're taking the time now to remind you know, about why and how it is important to celebrate yourself. And so, first of all, I'd like to kind of share that I feel like celebrating is similar to self-care, right? It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm going to do that. Like we put it on the planner or, we set a reminder, but it doesn't happen oftentimes. And similarly to self-care, I also think it's not something that we shouldn't beat ourselves up if we don't get to do that thing, like this isn't something to add on your to-do list. This is really time for you to be intentional and to choose how big or how small that you want to celebrate your wins. And this is more of just, I think, a way to build that muscle to support yourself, to add on, when we say building a business, it's like building a house. These are the little pieces, you could say, the tiny little pieces that are added on to building a home. And if we don't add these tiny details, then it can maybe, impact the entire building of the house, or, the house can collapse. But that's how I find it to be as important as building a business, is doing these seemingly little things to celebrate your wins. It's just as impactful as, meeting those milestones when you're getting your new client, when you're, you know, beating your revenue goal, that overarching larger goals. And so the smaller wins, one of the communities that I first joined when I started my VA, that was the huge like proponent was, celebrate your mini wins. And so I love that. I was like, that is awesome. It was a completely foreign mindset, right? We're not taught that when we work in corporate 9 to 5. We're taught to um, just make sure you do well when that 30, 60, 90-day review comes, and maybe you'll get a raise. And so another thing that I wanted to share was I was actually listening to a podcast, and what really stuck with me was the fact that, when we start our business, we're choosing our hard, right? You're deciding to choose this hard for yourself. So why not decide to choose your wins? Why not decide to choose that time for yourself to celebrate your wins? If you're going to choose your hard, choose your celebration. And so that's kind of how I see it as well, is, if I'm taking the, you could say the focus to work towards the milestones, what can actually help me get there is celebrating the little wins. And I'm talking about little wins like, on, say, for the day, I actually, gosh, right, with productivity, there's so many uh, tips and hacks and everything. I've tried them all. What's worked for me is focusing on 3 things. And so when I accomplish those 3 things in a day, that's huge. And I celebrate that. And so the way that I've been celebrating, it's actually pretty seasonal. I don't hold myself to like I need to I must celebrate it this way. I'm very much of a seasonal kind of ebb and flow person. And so maybe initially for me it was you know going to a favorite tea shop and celebrating with my daughter, right? Because at the start, she was really my big reason why. So I brought her into my celebration, and we love going to our local tea shop and getting our favorite drinks, and that's how I would celebrate my wins. Or, and, I did this either at the end of the week, because that's like the perfect time, right? On Fridays, kind of, reviewing your schedule, going back and seeing all the things that you've accomplished. And it was a really good kind of feel good kind of way to celebrate. And so that's one of the things that I did. But now I find that my celebration is more taking time for myself. And I celebrate I actually have my journal or planner, and that's where I write down my celebration. So I'll celebrate, things like this. I jumped on a call with Steph, got to meet a really awesome person. I got to actually go out for a walk today. Self-care is another thing that I'm trying to work on. And that's more of just, um, not in a way where it's like, oh, I'm going to go do my nails, I'm going to go do my hair. Those are great things. But really, self-care is like taking time to slow down, to rest. And so that's another great thing I think with celebrating too, is if you totally want to, you can, double it up, right? You can go for a walk as a celebration, and that's also self-care for you. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you for sharing all of that. And it's funny that you mentioned Fridays because in my programs, we always celebrate on Friday. So every Friday I ask, what's everybody celebrating this week? Like big, small, it could be as little as like my son was sick and now he's not anymore. So my household has like returned to normal, which is a celebration, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't even have to be business related, but I
Yeah.
think the thing that's so hard for entrepreneurs, like the reason why it's so hard for us to celebrate is because a lot of us, we always are trying to reach that next goal.
Hmm.
It's like we're always trying to, like, we always want more, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I talk to my clients, we actually were just talking about this recently on one of our calls, but it's like, it's so important to be comfortable with where you're at now. And like you said, like understand these small wins come in and those are okay to celebrate too. Like we don't only have to celebrate like the $50,000 cash months, right? Like there's other things that we can celebrate and be comfortable with celebrating too. And it, like you said, it's like a muscle that we have to build, right? So when we can start with these little small things like going for a walk, hopping on a podcast interview, like things that you would never normally think are like quote unquote celebrations, you're building that muscle. So by the time those really big celebrations come, like it's like a normal thing. You're just like celebrating everything, right? Which
Right.
I think is so much fun. Like it just makes life more fun too.
Yeah, I love that you touched on like being present where you're at and, being grateful for where you're at, right? Oftentimes, gratitude is what kind of builds our optimism, our, purpose in a way, right? When we feel like um when we're focusing on the things that do work rather than the things that don't, that would actually be the secret sauce sometimes. And
Yeah, it
so it's
brings
not
more
like
of those
we're,
things into you, like universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
We can get a little woo if you want, but like those, you'll start to notice like when you're positive, more positive things start to happen. When you're grateful, more things to be grateful for happen. Like
yep.
it's not as complicated as people make it out to be, right? It's
Yeah,
actually
I
very
mean, when
simple.
you think of it that way, right? Like, it's that makes sense. But the application, that's definitely where it gets hard because, like you said, we're so kind of into, jumping onto the next goal. And because oftentimes, some of us are solopreneurs or we have very small teams. And so we're still working in our business. And so we're not maybe outsourcing everything yet. And so that could be, one of the challenges there. But, you know, if you are intentional, and really when you think about it, celebrating could be 2 minutes a day. And when you think of all the hours that you have, 2 minutes a day to celebrate the things that you've won, or like you said, it could be life. It doesn't necessarily have to be business. And so for me, it could be sometimes literally stuff. I'm celebrating that my morning drop off for my daughter's school went well. She woke
Yeah.
up, got herself ready without me asking her 10 times, that's a win. And so
This I'm glad that you mentioned that because this is going to be so silly, but outside of our neighborhood, we have a really busy street. So, and we always have to turn left to go somewhere. And like turning left is, it can be a nightmare. Like you can be sitting there for hours. So, whenever we have to turn left and you can just like turn left out of there right away, I celebrate. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the greatest day ever because
I
there have
love
been
it.
times where I have literally sat there waiting to turn left for like 10 minutes, not even joking because it's like one of the busiest streets in our area. It's a highway. So, like little things like that, like being able to turn left right away without having to wait 10 minutes calls for a celebration, right? So, it's like finding those little pockets in your day where you can celebrate. And then, of course, that will naturally roll over into your business as well.
Exactly. I love that you brought that because that really is it's a frame of mind
Mm-hmm.
when you're choosing to celebrate, rather than sitting there getting frustrated, maybe using some F-bombs and whatnot, right? You're
Not gonna
using
lie,
it.
that has happened before when I've been running late and I'm like, like I need to go.
I know the red lights. It never works for you. It's always like you hit red light upon red light when only when you're rushing, not when
Right.
you're just cruising along. But yeah,
And that's why we just need to be calm.
exactly.
We need to be in the moment. And then it's gonna work out for in our best interest. So love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that kind of went down a path that I did not expect it to go, but that's fine.
Sorry, I do that to a lot of people.
I do it too.
I
That
lead them
that's
to the sidebars.
that's how this podcast works. um now I want to talk very quickly before we wrap up, like, did you notice, like either when you were first starting out or even now, like did you have expectations for yourself or for your business that you placed upon yourself? Yeah. Okay. I see you're shaking your head. Okay, go ahead. I'll let you share.
Totally, right? It's almost okay. You know, when you are working at your 9 to 5 and now you're starting your business, it's a whole different world that you're opening yourself to. And so with that, it's also a lot of noise, a lot of expectations, right? So a lot of strategies and, a lot of goals that you see people are making. And of course, as a newbie, you're kind of like a sponge. You're taking it all in. And so yeah, definitely I've fallen into the trap of like, oh gosh, okay, 10K months. That is what I must hit, because everyone's talking about hitting 10K months, right? And if you can hit that, then it will just, open up the next level of whatever for your business. And so yeah, definitely I've taken on these, expectations that while I see them work for others, I'm adopting them for myself rather than really taking inventory of, is this really what I want in my life right now? Is this what's going to align with the vision that I have in the next 20 years? So yeah, most definitely. And, it's a learning process. And so so I'm not totally beating myself up for it. It's more of just like, oh, I'm glad I went through that phase early on. Early on as in, like several months into the business, like 6 months or less, definitely started that. And then and because it happened, I'm also able to kind of recognize when these emotions come up again, where I feel like I'm falling short, or why isn't it happening, quicker? Right? It's always like, why isn't it happening now? And so, yeah, definitely, it still comes up, and I'm sure, will come up again in the next phase in the business. But it's just one of those where once you recognize it, you're able to um, to be more. I guess you could say you could allow more space for yourself then to ponder about it and to think about it versus just automatically accepting it. So less of that automation. Automation's great, but sometimes we
Hey,
need to take a pause.
you guys know I love automation. I have like 100 automations set up at any time, but
That's
in my
awesome.
business, not my life. Now, one thing that you very, very briefly touched on, excuse me, are the expectations that we place. Like you kind of said it this way, like based on where you're at right now. So, like where you're at now and where you want to go. So, I think that's so important to talk about because, like, for me personally, the season of life that I'm in right now, I don't want to be working more than like 10 or 15 hours a week because my kids are little. I have literally a baby on the way right now, and my son is 3 years old. So, like, I want to soak up as much time as possible with them right now. Now, say like 10 plus years from now, when they're older, they're kind of like doing their own thing ish. You know what I mean? Or when they're teenagers, maybe that's a season of my life where I want to work a whole lot more, like maybe I want to start another business or like go into another event, like who knows, right? So I think it's really important to set expectations based on where you're at and make them realistic based on your life too, because if you have like a bunch of kids running around, like that's like you can only do so much. Like let's be real. Right, you can't be superwoman at all times, whereas if you're like somebody who's single who doesn't have any commitments, your expectations, it can shift based on where you're at in your life at that point. So do you have thoughts about that? I see you shaking your head. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Same with you. I, when I started my business, my daughter was in, I want to say, oh my gosh, 2020, right? So COVID happened. We were homeschooling all of a sudden, you know, and it kind of worked and it kind of brought its own challenges. But, similarly, during that phase, for me, it was just like, okay, one client and I'm good, I'm golden. And then after several months, I made a goal for having maybe another client adding into, to the books. And so, but right now, I do have to say, I'm taking care of my elderly mom, and so my goals I do have to tweak it a little bit, as much as I want to go full force, like, 100 miles per hour, I have to slow myself down. And it's because, like you said, you want to be present for the people that you have in your life right now. And especially with kids, they are at their age during this time only. And it's not something that I can revisit later and be like, oh, hey, why don't we, why don't we go to the Disney store, now that she's 15 or whatever, and do all the things that kids would do. It's like, let's not finger paint, so it's just being like you said, it allows us to be present with the people that we care for. And it definitely changed. And that's what that helps me to accept, also knowing that it's the season where I'm at, and it's not like a permanent, I'm only going to be able to work this many hours, or I'm only going to be able to have this many income goal or client, in the books. So
Yeah, and I know a lot of people talk about like having it all, and I honestly, I'm the outlier. I truly think that you can like quote unquote have it all, but it's going to look different in every season. Like right now, I would consider myself as having it all. Like my husband's retired from his job, our family's home, like we spend time with our kids, like we are living the life that I wanted to live when I started this business, right? So I would consider that as like having it all, right?
yeah.
Whereas like people who are like, how do I even phrase this? Like if they don't think it's possible to do everything in one at one point in their life, but it really just comes down to if you believe it's possible for you, how you set your business up to be like flexible, because right now you said you're caring for an elderly parent, right? So it's amazing that your business gives you the flexibility to do that, right? Like that's another thing to be grateful for, right? You have that flexibility. And then maybe another one of your goals is like, I don't know, whatever your personal goals are. I'm curious, do you think that you can like quote unquote have it all in this season that you're in right now?
I think well, I don't honestly, I don't know if I can handle it at all. It's
Oh,
it's
that's
almost like
that's
it
good. That's
comes with,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
so it kind of comes with, again, going back to the expectation. Why do we feel the need to have it all? What does this all really means for us, right? And so I have my priorities, and I think those, if they are in alignment with where I'm at, then it feels good to me. And that's, the relationship, the spiritual, and the health. Those are the three main priorities, And if it feels good and right, then I do feel like I have it all. But it's I feel like it's almost like a pie or a wheel, and you kind of have to shift which one gets the main. So I don't know if that's a good metaphor, but yeah, so it's just, it's like you have to shift for sure. And these are all of the components that maybe make up your life. But it really is, like you said, you're the driver of that, and you can decide on what it is that you can prioritize. And so, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I don't have like a, you know, like one way or the other kind of answer for that.
No, that's fine. I was just honestly curious to see what your opinion was. And I liked how you used the word prioritize, because I think that's the perfect word to use. So that helps like put it into perspective for, well, me and then other people who are listening as well. So thank you for sharing that. I'm just always curious because that's such like a weird topic that people talk about
No, I
that a
love
lot of
it.
people
Yeah,
don't agree
that's
with.
one of my core values too. It's just following your curiosity,
Yeah.
which is, what led me to try so many different things, right?
Yeah,
So
for
it's good
sure.
to be curious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You were talking to a very curious person, and I have a very curious 3-year-old who wants to know why, what, all of the things. So curious is like the number one thing happening in our lives right now. But also off topic. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for going down all of the different paths that we went down in this episode. And if somebody wants to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
I would say Facebook and Instagram. I'm sorry if you hear the ring doorbell.
Wait, I don't hear it, so you're good.
Um, okay, good. So Facebook and Instagram, and it's I'll share the link with you. It's just so much easier.
Yeah, we'll
But
put it in
it's
the show
usually
notes.
my name, Avi Anderson.
Perfect. Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you again for being here. This was great.
Thank you, Steph.